By the end of this episode, you will know all that you need about Miguel de Cervantes' popular masterpiece, Don Quixote. Don Quixote could be considered the first modern European novel, and the founding work of Western literature. It is universally loved, and it is among the world's most translated books. The main themes of Don Quixote are realism versus idealism, truth and lies, madness and sanity, love and heroism. Miguel de Cervantes is commonly known as the greatest writer in the Spanish language and is credited with being Europe's first novelist. His life was both adventurous and tragic. When only 17 years old, he traveled to Rome and joined the Italian navy to fight in the Battle of Lepanto against the Ottomans. Miguel was badly wounded in that battle and lost control of his left arm completely. He then joined the Spanish army and even received medals of honor for his service. It was in one of his expeditions for the Spanish army that he was captured by pirates and sold into slavery in Algeria. He lived as a slave for 5 years until his relatives found him and paid for his freedom with the help of the Trinitarian Church. There are also accounts mentioning that he bought his freedom with the inheritance that his father left him. Now a poor and disabled man, while taking a job as a tax collector, Miguel tried his hand at writing and published his first play, La Galatea, which was not received well. It is believed that he wrote 20 plays, of which only 2 have survived. But it wasn't until 1605, when he published the first part of Don Quixote, that he tasted success and went from obscurity to instant fame. With Don Quixote's success, Cervantes finally achieved some degree of financial security and became a household name in Europe. 10 years later, and just 1 year before his death, he published the long-anticipated sequel to Don Quixote. A lesser Spanish nobleman from La Mancha, by the name of Alonso Quixano, was almost 50 years old when he lost his mind. He spent most of his time reading fictional books about chivalry, and was so obsessed with them that he took every word literally and believed them to be true. Copying the heroes of the books, he decided to become a knight-errant in search of glory and adventure to prove his worth and valor. He then found himself a suit of armor, gave himself the title of Don Quixote, and named his old horse Rocinante. As for his lady of love, he chose a farm girl, and without her even knowing it, he called her Dulcinea del Toboso. First, Don Quixote arrived at an inn, which he believed to be a castle. He treated prostitutes as noble ladies and asked the innkeeper, whom he referred to as the lord of the castle, to dub him a knight. At night, he stayed up guarding his armor, and when workers tried to move it out of the way to water the mules, he beat them up. Eventually, the innkeeper dubbed Don Quixote a knight in a pretend ceremony just to get rid of him. Next, he encountered a slave named Andres, who was tied to a tree by his master and being punished. Don Quixote freed the slave and forced the master to promise to pay him his wages and treat him fairly, a promise the master broke the moment Don Quixote left. He then ran into some merchants from Toledo, who insulted his imaginary but beloved lady Dulcinea. Enraged by their insults, Don Quixote attacked them to defend his lady's honor. The merchants beat the old man up and left him by the road to die. Fortunately, his neighbor found him and returned him to his home. When he was unconscious, his niece, his priest, and the local barber burned most of the books in his library and sealed up the room. When Don Quixote regained consciousness, they told him that it was all done by a wizard. A few months later, after getting his strength back, Don Quixote promised his neighbor, Sancho Panza, to make him a governor if he agreed to be his squire. Sancho, who was a simple farmer, agreed to the offer and snuck away with Don Quixote at dawn. Next, they came across 2 Benedictine friars who were traveling on the same road with a lady in a carriage. Don Quixote took the friars as captors of the lady and attacked them. An armed guard accompanying the party tried to defend them, and a fight broke out. The battle ended when the lady stepped out of the carriage, and ordered her companions to surrender to Don Quixote. Don Quixote agreed not to punish them on the condition that the guard would go to Lady Dulcinea and tell her of his bravery. After that, Don Quixote and Sancho encountered a group of goatherds who were going to the funeral of a student who, after reading too many pastoral novels, had left his studies to become a shepherd and seek the love of a shepherdess named Marcella. At the funeral, Marcella showed up and defended herself from the vile accusations the student had written about her in his poems. Then she vanished into the woods. Don Quixote and Sancho followed her, but gave up after a few hours. While they were resting by a pond, a group of Galicians showed up to water their ponies. Don Quixote's horse, Rocinante, tried to mate with the ponies, which caused the Galicians to beat him. Don Quixote rose to defend his horse, which caused the Galicians to beat both him and Sancho and leave them injured again. After escaping the ordeal, Don Quixote and Sancho arrived at a nearby inn and shared a room with another man in a hayloft. At night, Don Quixote, once again believing the inn was a castle, mistook a servant girl named Maritornes for a beautiful princess and asked her to sit with him. The girl panicked, and the other man attacked Don Quixote, causing a huge fight in which everyone was hurt. Next, an officer with a warrant to arrest Don Quixote for illegally freeing slaves was convinced by the priest to show mercy due to his insanity. Instead of taking him to prison, they locked him in a cage and made him believe it was an enchantment, and that there was a prophecy for his heroic return home. At this point, the first book ends. I strongly recommend all of you to read both of Don Quixote's books in their entirety. They are among the sweetest stories ever written, and I guarantee you will be both amused and enlightened by them. Because of time, I will not go through the entire second book here, but for the sake of a proper ending, I will summarize the final chapter. After being ridiculed by a duke and a duchess, and being sent on imagined adventures based on practical jokes, Don Quixote traveled to Barcelona, where he faced more mockery. At home, his worried friends devised a plan to defeat Don Quixote in a duel and force him to abandon knight-errantry as punishment. A young bachelor and friend of Don Quixote, named Sanson Carrasco, dressed as a knight and challenged him. After defeating Don Quixote, he ordered him to stop being a knight for 1 year and return home. Disheartened by his defeat, Don Quixote returned home, gradually became depressed, and eventually fell ill. After a long dream, he woke up having fully regained his sanity. He rejected his ambitions and apologized for the damage he had caused. He named his niece the main beneficiary of his will, on the condition that she never marry a man who reads books of chivalry. Very well, ladies and gentlemen, we are at the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed my summary of Don Quixote. Please consider subscribing, and see you in the next video.